In your
You ready?
report, yes,
Yeah, sure.
Parliament, you gave us a breakdown of the cost attached to splitting the boundaries. Can you just go into a little more details and how you believe that it won't have much of an impact on the country?
The issue of cost is really a red herring. The first thing to bear in mind is that the constitutional prescriptions governing the delimitation of boundaries does not include any consideration of cost. The Boundaries Commission has absolutely no authority to consider matters of cost. If the Boundaries Commission had to make a decision about the limitation on the basis of cost, anybody can go to court and get the decision struck down because the issue of cost is not a relevant criterion. But it is always easy to frighten the public about issues of cost. Very easy, because the solution public believes that a huge portion of the budget is spent on politicians, that politicians get paid these huge salaries, they have all these privileges. But what are the facts? The government of St. Lucia spends $459 million a year on salaries and wages of its employees. 459, and let me repeat that. Of that total amount of 459 million, the government spends on ministers, on members of parliament who are not ministers, on senators, on the president, the speaker of the house, a total of 0.66% of 1% of that 459 million. Clearly, that's not a huge sum, substantial sum, or significant sum. Some people may argue, okay, these are difficult economic circumstances, but my goodness, what do you do? Do you abandon your constitutional requirements and your prescriptions in that kind of situation? Why have a constitution if you don't want to obey your constitution and follow what your constitution tells you? Where you have a government who ignores the constitution that it is supposed to apply, what you're going to have at the end of the day is a government that breaks the constitution once, is going to break it a second time, it is going to break it a third time. For me, the overriding consideration, and indeed for the government that I lead, is that the constitutional requirement is satisfied. I want to emphasize that those constitutional provisions have been in place since 1979, when the Independence Constitution was introduced. So in my view, the issue, of course, is not an overwhelming consideration in all of the circumstances.
All right. In response to political leader Alan Chasney speaking about an independent body, I am of the understanding that for there to be an independent body, there needs to be an amendment of the Constitution to an extent. What are your thoughts on that, him saying that we need an independent?
Alan Chasney speaks in blissful ignorance of the constitutional provisions that govern these issues. The fact of the matter is that the Independence Constitution, authored, of course, during a period when the United Workers' Party was in office, provides a reasonably independent mechanism, meaning that the opposition has 2 members, the governing party has 2 members, and of course the commission is chaired by the chairman. So the provisions that you have in place are actually provisions we inherited from our independent constitution. Question is, has that commission at any point in its history ever done a disservice to the people of St. Lucia or to the independence of the requirements of the Constitution over time? I suspect the answer is going to be no. The fact of the matter is that if you want to change those provisions in the Constitution, then you'll have to amend the Constitution of the country, which I think would require in this instance a 2/3 majority. I've never heard the United Workers' Party speaking in terms of amending or supporting amendments to the Constitution of St. Lucia. So I think there's a lot of talk in blissful ignorance of the actual provisions of the Constitution. But in this instance, if you're talking of recreating the commission that governs such matters, you clearly will have to amend the Constitution, and you're absolutely correct.
All right, case in point, I take you to Grosley constituency.
Sure.
Emma Hippolyte, she won by 7 votes.
7 votes. All right.
They're saying that bringing up the boundaries is to side with the SLP government, but we've seen that she only won by 7 votes. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there are other people who have won seats by small majorities, maybe not as small as hers, but that's not the issue in Grosley. The constituency in Grosley clearly is in violation of the constitutional requirements. You have 23,000 persons living in Grosley. In a constituency like therefore, you have about 9,000 plus persons. I mean, you have even smaller numbers in Dennery South, for example. I think the number of persons is closer to 5,000 or 4,900 or thereabout. So that the continued existence of the Grosley constituency would have been in flagrant disregard of the constitutional prescriptions governing constituency boundaries. Now, the interesting thing is that when the process was underway, you never heard the United Workers' Party making a sound. And I'm fully aware of the fact that they were written to, they were asked to make proposals. Their members agreed with the proposals. If, of course, there was ever any reason to suggest that there was an attempt to gerrymander or to design the boundaries to benefit the St. Lucia Labour Party, then they would have had every reason not to sign the report and not to be part of the decision-making process. The question is, why did they go along with it? Now, we have to be very careful about political posturing. On the one hand, while the leader of the United Workers' Party and others are making those suggestions to convey to the public or to give the public the impression there's some gerrymandering, they are busy manipulating events behind the scenes so that some of them can get access to the very seats that they are claiming that has been gerrymandered. Now, it's time we end the political posturing and attempting to confuse the people and, of course, to be so dishonest with the people of St. Lucia. You know full well that you're interested in some of the new seats, yet you want to pretend behind closed doors. Otherwise, that can't be right. I think we have to stop playing those games.
All right, last question.
Sure.
We're going to celebrate our 36th independent next week. I had an interview with our national archivist, Margot Thomas.
Right.
She says that St. Lucia was born in political turmoil, and so therefore that we will always experience this back and forth turmoil between the St. Lucia Labour Party and the UWP. Going forward in our independence, what would you like to see the two parties go forward?
My goodness, you're asking me to be a guardian.
What would you like?
I really disagree with her, though. If you have translated what she said correctly.
Yes, that's exactly what
Because
she was born
it
in
seems to me
turmoil.
that she's saying that if you were born under certain conditions, then you are destined to live those conditions. That can't be right. I mean, you and I know that people are born into different situations, and then, of course, their future life take a very different turn. So, I mean, I don't subscribe to that kind of philosophy. I would say that St. Lucia has been a relatively peaceful country. In 1979, when we approached independence, yes, there were disagreements, and it was not just fed by the issue of independence. It was fed by other factors, for example, disagreements between the government and then public sector unions. But since then, the country has been relatively quiet, relatively peaceful. You will always get issues. In the life of any country, there will be issues, there will be moments of anxiety, there will be moments of tension, and that's normal. I mean, it's part of the process of accumulating experience. It's part of the process of maturity. I think there's so much that we have to look back on with a certain measure of satisfaction. Consider, for example, in the past year or two, the opposition and the government have worked together on a number of issues. People sometimes think we can't talk to each other or relate to each other, but just think for a moment. I reached out to the opposition by improving the status of the leader of the opposition. That was used by the opposition itself to remove one of its leaders. Both the opposition and government did a joint visit to the dam. Unheard of. It's the first time we've actually sat side by side and looked at a government project and discussed the possibilities and the future of that project. The government set up a citizenship committee to look at the issue of economic citizenship, global citizenship. The opposition was represented. The National Vision Commission, the opposition was represented. At independence ceremonies, for example, we now invite the leader of the opposition to speak to the people at large. This has never used to happen. So it is very easy for us to look at a period in our history, truncate that period, and arrive at certain conclusions. But I remain optimistic about this country. There will be setbacks from time to time. We will have problems from time to time. We will have issues from time to time. But I think we are capable of conquering those problems. And I don't think that there has been anything since our independence that has been so overwhelming as to cause us to lose confidence in the future. Yes, we have economic issues. Yes, we have economic challenges, but we have the ability to deal with them. I'm very optimistic about this country. I'm not looking back. I'm looking forwards.
All right. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.